being recorded.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Krista Knight. I'm the Assistant Executive Director for Special Education Services, and then Todd Lofton is here with me. And so welcome to our webinar number 6, Leadership and Management. And the purpose of the webinar, of course, is, we're wanting to target new directors or special education directors that maybe have been in the field for a while but need a refresher on the specific topic. And we are we have, through this webinar series, identified the components of the general supervision system. And we're going to provide an overview of regulations related to selective general supervision topics to LEA directors. And then, of course, through all of our webinars, we provide an opportunity for question and answer on the specific topics in general supervision. And again, this is our 6th webinar, and you can find all the webinars posted on our special education page of our website under News and Memo. I will tell you that the January 14th webinar, that was the SPP APR, did not take place this year, and so that's something we'll look at maybe adding to next year's schedule. But all the other webinars are recorded and posted on our webpage under News and Memo if you're interested in watching any of those. So,
hang on. I think I see some chats that not everyone can hear.
And Todd and Krista, I'm going to put in some suggestions to them to call in separately, so I'll try and walk them through that.
Okay.
Okay. So the outcomes for today is that as participants, you will understand the difference between leadership and management. And of course, we know they're both very important. They complement each other, but they do differ. And so today you'll get some information on the difference between the two. Understand the evolution of leadership and management from the traditional way we thought about leadership and management to what is needed in our system today. And then to understand the 7 principles of leadership and 8 principles of management. You do have some materials available for you today. You'll have the agenda and the presentation. And you'll find a variations on a theme handout, which is titled All Kids Can Learn. And you have the 19 questions handout, which is a simple kind of self-assessment, answering the questions like how inclusive are we, and then the 12 commandments for district and school leaders. So you do have all those materials available to you today. Again, just talking about the big picture. The big picture is that the IDA regs describes expectations for districts and states to provide a free, appropriate public education, and that, and looking at procedural safeguards, child find, dispute resolution, disproportionate representation. So it's important that we're looking at all these pieces to ensure that students are receiving the services that they need. This here again is just the 8 kind of the core components of our general supervision system. We've gone over these in all the webinars, but you'll see how they all are dependent on one another, and that's our SPPs, state goals with measurable targets, fiscal management, our integrated on-site and off-site monitoring activities, effective policies and procedures, data on processes and results, improvements, corrections, incentives, and sanctions, effective dispute resolution, and targeted technical assistance and professional development. So it's important that all states, have the responsibility under IDA to have a system of special education supervision that monitors the implementation of IDEA. So we're required to have this integrated system of the 8 core components in order to make sure that we improve the educational results and the functional outcomes of students with disabilities. So what is it all about? Well, again, the primary focus of federal and state law is to improve the results and functional outcomes of all children with disabilities, and to ensure that states meet those requirements with a particular emphasis on those requirements that are most clearly related or closely related to improving educational results for children with disabilities. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark at this point, I think.
Yes. Thank you, Krista. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Gabrilchak, and I currently serve as a program specialist for the TACE organization within Utah State University. We are part of the Department of Center for Persons with Disabilities, and I'd like to welcome you this afternoon and appreciate your time with us as we talk about leadership and management of your administrative positions. To give you a little bit of background about me, I started my education career about 20 years ago. I was hired on as a paraprofessional one-on-one aide for a student who had multiple low-incident disabilities. And from there, I went on to teach special education for 9 years. I've been a building principal both at the elementary and secondary level, a superintendent of a school district, and I've also served as a director of the Office of Student and School Supports for the state of Nevada. And in that particular opportunity, I was in charge of the majority of Nevada's Title I programs, Title III, 4, 5, and 7, and then also a lot of their state initiatives that they have come out. So I feel really fortunate to have the career that I've had so far. However, I'm very excited about being here with you this afternoon and also learning from you. Just so that you know, I am calling you from just outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, and the webinar opportunities are a great opportunity that our organization works with state education agencies throughout the United States to provide some type of professional learning opportunity. And that's what hopefully today we're able to go ahead and reach our objective is of helping you learn just a little bit about some different leadership opportunities and practices that you can instill into your practice, and then also some management opportunities too. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and as you can see, we have this word called cloud here up on the screen, and it's a leadership word cloud. And I really like this because it really describes the skills that are needed for leadership to be an effective school and district leadership or administrator. Two words that I would like to add to that word cloud, though, would be belief and charisma. And charisma is the ability to influence others to follow the mission and vision of what you're trying to accomplish in your organization. And it's very, very important that you have that charismatic personality to help others follow your lead. The other one that's very important in our context today of learning about leadership and management is beliefs. What are our belief systems? For an example, do we truly believe that all students can learn? As I mentioned earlier, I started my education career as a one-on-one paraprofessional aide, and that's where my journey went ahead and started with my belief system. Did I really believe that Brian, who was my student that I was with all day long, did I believe that he had the opportunity and the ability to learn a rigorous curriculum or a rigorous program that has been set up for him to participate each day with? And that's where my journey started. And so hopefully we're going to go ahead and spend a little bit of time on our belief systems and our belief mindset. And what I would like you to do is this is what I call a leadership formative assessment that I've done with my past principals and past staff members. And it's titled Variations of Theme. And what I usually do in my practice is that I go ahead and I present this opportunity to find out where we're at in our belief systems within our schools. And I usually do this activity biannually. We'll do it 2 times a year just to measure where we're at with our progress, with our mindsets. And this is an activity that I hope that you will go ahead and use with your teams to find out exactly where they are at with their mindset, with where we are at within our organization. So what I'm going to do is I want you to read through this document with me. There's 4 statements there. And we're going to go ahead and start with based on their ability. We believe that all students can learn, but the extent of their learning is determined by their innate ability or aptitude. This aptitude is relatively fixed, and as teachers, we have little influence over the extent of our student learning. It is our job to create multiple programs or tracks that address the different abilities of students and to guide the students to the appropriate program. The second statement says, we believe that all students can learn if they elect to put forth the necessary effort. It is our job to provide all students with this opportunity to learn. And we fulfill our responsibilities when we attempt to present lessons that are both clear and engaging. In the final analysis, however, while it is our job to teach, it is the student's job to learn. We should invite students to learn, but honor their decisions if they elect not to do so. The third statement says, we believe that all students can learn and that it is our responsibility to help each student demonstrate some growth as a result of their experience with us. The extent of the growth will be determined by a combination of the student's innate ability and effort. It is our job to encourage all students to learn as much as possible, but the extent of their learning is dependent on the factors over which we have little control. And then the last statement states this: we believe that all students can and must learn at a relatively high levels of achievement. It is our job to create an environment in our classrooms that result in the high level of performance. We are confident that with our support and help, students can master challenging academic materials, and we expect them to do so. We are prepared to work collaboratively with colleagues, students, and parents to achieve this shared educational purpose. So what I would like you to do, if I were to come visit your school district, what statement best represents your school district? How would you go ahead and explain this to me? So if, for an example, if you feel at this particular time your school district represents statement number 1, I want you to go ahead and vote where your school district is currently at. And at times, you know, it could be debated that, for an example, 2 statements can go together. You know, there's one day that I see that we're currently at a level number 1, but other days where we may be at a level 2, or we may have a combination of both. So if you'll go ahead and just take a few moments to go ahead and answer that survey, I would really appreciate it. And I want you to be honest with it. Make sure that you're focusing on the evidence that you may see that supports that statement for your school district. And the numbers are coming in, and we're going to give you a couple more minutes to go ahead and answer this question. I appreciate your participation with us. Okay, so we've got a good sample of data that we were able to go ahead and gather from this. The majority of leaders out there in Oklahoma that are attending this webinar feel that there are 3, and that is they believe that all students can learn, and that it is our responsibility to help each student demonstrate their growth as a result of their experience with us, and that's really good. That would be really what we would consider a very high and expected level for most schools and most administrators. And so the second one with the number 2, you know, they came in second place at the 35%. And what I would go ahead and hope that you're able to reflect on this activity is that, You know, different days you may be at different levels, and that's okay. But the most important thing is to realize exactly where you're at and what your culture feels like, so that you can hopefully get to that level 4 that you would desire to be to. So what I would do, and I would encourage you to go ahead and use this activity again with your team members. Just, you know, have them sit down and answer these questions. You know, where we're at, what does the evidence show of our belief statements and our mindsets? And it's a fun activity that brings out a lot of discussion and debate, and also perspective, which is very, very important. So we're going to go ahead and switch back to the PowerPoint here. I'm just going to give it a minute to load back up. And again, thank you very much for participating in the poll, and I hope that is a tool that you can go ahead and use as you move forward in your practice. It takes a system, not just an administrator, and here are some statements that I was able to come up with through some of my research and studying of leadership. And leaders have the responsibility to create a culture of high academic expectations and positive relationships. That's very, very important. Unfortunately, in a lot of school systems, we're very structurally driven, and we don't focus enough on culture. And that culture part of our schools is very, very important to whether we're going to be successful or not with our students. We need to establish a shared vision and communicate to all constituent groups. We need to align our organizational structures and systems to our vision. We need to build leadership capacity through an empowerment model, support decision-making with relevant data systems, and then last, we need to realize the organizational leadership is a function and not just one single person. The words that you see bolded on that particular slide are things that I thought of as I reflected back on my leadership experience, both as a principal and superintendent and director. And if someone were to come and ask me and say, Mark, what are 5 key elements of effective leadership, I would say this. The first one is leadership, and that is that the leader is a competent leader who is credible, but also has the charisma to move a school system forward. Number 2 is collective and self-efficacy. And an example of efficacy is just what we did. What is our current belief system and what we're trying to accomplish as an organization? It also goes into the belief systems of individuals, and what that is what is the individual will and the skill level of that particular individual. So for an example, if there's a person who really doesn't believe that all students can learn at this current time in their career, they may be struggling with their belief systems. And what it is our job as leaders to go ahead and cultivate them to bring up that will level so that their skill level improves. The number 3 important element that I thought, as I reflected in my experience, is culture. Does the leader understand that culture is our shared beliefs, our values, our norms, and our expectations? And at times we get culture and climate intertwined with one another, and it's very important that we keep them separate. Culture, again, is our beliefs, our values, our norms, and our expectations, where climate really deals with what the person, their attitude that they're bringing to school that particular day. So there may be some days where the climate of our school is really high, and then other days where it may be low. And then number 4 would be alignment. The leader needs to know how to align our vocabulary terms, procedures, and policies that we use. For an example, when I was in my practice, I had a colleague who would intertwine the curriculum and then also with resources. And those are 2 separate things. You may have a resource that supports the curriculum, but they're 2 different things. But that person would always get those 2 elements mixed up to where we weren't speaking the same language across the organization that we needed to. So it's very important that we understand and that we're using the same terminology and vocabulary terms. And then the last one that's not up there that I think is really important is what I call stop doing. Does the leader have the courage to move the organization forward by eliminating those practices that are not being effective for students? It's very important to focus on stop doing, because what education has been known for is to go ahead and continue to add on to the plate and to add either more initiatives or more processes to try to improve student learning. And so it's important to make sure that we're able to understand how important stop doing is in our organization and also in our leadership. According to the International Center for Leadership in Education, there's two types of leadership. There's instructional leadership and organizational leadership. And the next two slides, we're going to go ahead and focus a little bit on the instructional leadership element and then also the organizational leadership element. This organization, which again I mentioned was the International Center for Leadership in Education, what they did is they went ahead and they did a big research study. And they went in and they observed schools and collected data on what current school systems and leaders were doing within their systems. And what they had found is that traditional practices that they had seen across their research study is that they found that leaders were really good at managing in the current system. They would use past experiences to help solve problems. They were pretty good promoters of standard procedures. They replicated practices with fidelity. They looked to supervisors for answers. They relied on individual expertise, and they were driven by authority. And it's not that those practices are negative in any way. I think that those practices have worked good for some kids, but not necessarily all kids. And the reason that I highlighted replicate practices with fidelity is that word fidelity we see quite a bit. And that's become kind of a terminology or a term that we've used in our terminology of, our practices need to be with fidelity. And we do. We need to make sure that our learning activities are aligned to our standards and that we're measuring our work and our instruction with common formative and summative assessments. But what the International Center for Leadership recommended is that we need to create new practices to meet students' needs. And that was something that stood out to me, is that as a leader, we need to continue to, again, take things that may not be effective, but then start new practices that will be effective to meet all students' needs and just set of a group of students. Organizational leadership. Again, the traditional, what they saw in the research study is that they saw leadership basically setting the vision for the organization by the top leaders. Unfortunately, some leaders may have instilled fear with goals. They implemented rigid structures to support adult needs, and that they've utilized the top-down change for the ease of administration and compliance. And so, again, as I look back on and reflected back on my administrative career, there is a lot of rigid structures that I remember that I've either tried to implement or I participated in. And it's very, very important that we use flexible structures to support our student needs. And that's what's really exciting about providing services for students under IDEA is that you, as a leader, are very flexible in trying to meet those students' needs. And that's something that you really need to set out with the rest of your organization if you happen to have structures and leadership that are rigid in their practice. Brenda, will you bring up the 19 questions document for us? Thank you. This is another tool that I hope that you will go ahead and take from our webinar this afternoon, that you can sit down with your leadership team or your teachers and just kind of go through. And what it is there's 19 statements on this document, and it asks the questions of what we currently believe. So for an example, are students with and without disabilities considered full members of the school community? What do we believe with that? And then how does the evidence that we see in a particular school day support with what we believe? And if there's a discrepancy between the evidence that we see and what we believe, what is our plan to address that discrepancy so that we can make sure that all of our students are considered full members of our school community? So I would go ahead and challenge you to go ahead and use this document as a formative assessment, or to start a conversation with the other administrators that serve with you in your district. Okay, Brenda, if you'll go ahead and switch us back to the PowerPoint. Thank you. In some of my research opportunities, I have found that, you know, in school systems that are having difficulty with student achievement, they're really missing a key component, and that key component is an effective leader. In school systems that are successful, research has shown that, you know, the teacher is the most important element in making a school be successful in the area of student achievement. And I don't argue that at all. I think that that's really important. But if you have a school system that's currently struggling, that leader becomes a huge element to whether or not that school system is going to change its practices to be successful. And so there are 7 statements here that I've been able to research and I'd like to present to you this afternoon. And they are as follows. Leaders have the responsibility to create and sustain collaborative relationship with all stakeholders within their system. And when I'm talking stakeholders, I'm talking staff members.
Help you go back to base, please.
Whether they're administrators or teachers, it's very to have that collaborative relationship with each other. We need to align all systems to meet all students' needs. We need to be able to facilitate shared responsibility, build coherence and clarity, model practices and expectations, reflect on leadership effectiveness of self and others, and develop the leadership capacity in self and others. And it kind of goes back to the earlier statement. It's not just about one individual, but it's about our system. It's about all of our people. And these are some principles that we want to go ahead and see. In the next 7 slides, what we're going to do is we're going to just take just some statements out of each principle. And again, from my perspective, with principle 1 in creating and sustaining collaborative relationships, the statement that resonated with me the most was, as a leader, it's important that I generate collective understanding of how the team will function collaboratively when an individual does not agree, but the will of the group is clear and the team is moving forward. And that's very important, that we provide clarity and coherence in this particular type of principle when we're sustaining collaborative relationships with our teams. Principle number 2, aligning system to meet all students' needs. We want to make sure that we're using common vocabulary and everyone uses the same terms with the same meaning to describe the core processes that we're trying to undertake. This is very important. Again, misinterpretation of a specific term or a word or a process, all it does is it causes confusion between team members and organizations. So it's important that we really are focused in on having that common vocabulary system. And I believe that Todd would like to go ahead and make a comment with principle 2. So Todd, I'm going to turn the time over to you for just a minute.
Yeah, and hopefully everyone can hear me. We talk a lot about advocating for all of our students, especially our special ed students. And we do have some great examples in districts across the state of special ed directors that do that kind of thing. And one recent thing that happened over the past couple of years was we had sent out the shortened day memo, I think in December 2016. And I remember that Lawton Public Schools and Chris Sharkey is the special ed director. Him and his team looked at that, and there was a statement on there that transportation schedules shouldn't limit a student's day. And so they took that one statement and they recognized that, you know, this was a large problem in their district. And everyone here knows that Lawton is a very large district. And his team and him met with parents and administrators at the district level, site level administrators, the principals, the vice principals, and teachers, and really advocated that for a change to this system because it wasn't working for students with disabilities. They had a lot of students that were leaving early so that those students could accommodate the transportation schedule and not the other way around. And I just think it's a really good example of that, really taking that advocacy to heart and really aligning systems to meet all their students' needs, because that did take a lot of time. It took a lot of effort on their part to get people to change existing practices that were in place for a long time. But, they recognized that it's something convenient for the district, convenient for some of their students, but not all of their students. And so they worked through all of that to help ensure that those students with disabilities really got all the instructional time that they should be afforded to be provided a FAPE. So a lot of things like that happen out there, I think, that can serve as examples to other districts when we think, this is how the system is. We can't really change it, but there are examples in large districts where that kind of change happens, and it's sometimes not very public, but those special ed directors out there are really working hard to make sure that, again, all their systems align and they meet all of the students' needs. So I just wanted to share that story with everyone real quick. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. And we do have a question from Pam, and Pam states in the chat box, on the 19 questions, how are we supposed to respond? Yes or no, or rate on a scale? And Pam, that's a great question, and I just want to leave that up to you. You can do it any way that you would like. As long as it's giving you information on what that person's belief system is, what their mindset may be currently at, or where we're at as an organization, you can use a rating scale to answer those questions. You can go ahead and provide some type of little bit of narrative of the things that maybe you would have observed to show exactly where the organ is currently at with their practices. So it's a real flexible document that you can go ahead and use it to what you believe would give you the most information as you move along in your practice. Thank you for asking that question, Pam. We really appreciate it. Principle number 3, facilitate shared responsibility. And again, this is part of moving from the I, me type of mindset to the we, us, and ours. And we're really fixated on accountability, especially policymakers are very fixated on accountability. And I'm not saying that we don't need accountability measures in our system. We do. However, in order to have a successful organization and a successful learning culture, we need to have shared responsibility. And what shared responsibility is to increase the ownership while simultaneously decreasing stress. When we continue to work in isolation, people can become pretty stressed in their practice. And what we want to try to do is try to take away as much stress that we can, and to increase that ownership that we all own where we're currently at, so that it just doesn't fall on one or two people's shoulders. As far as the accountability, again, why I highlighted that on micromanagement, I don't believe that there's anybody out there that really likes to be micromanaged. We hire people to implement their skills and their talents so that they could help our organization be successful. And we need to make sure that we're always cultivating those opportunities to help people shine and use their skills and to help others be successful in what our outcomes need to be. Principle number 4 is building coherence and clarity. We need to answer the why question before the how question. A really good resource that I'd like to share with you this afternoon is Simon Sinek. If you go into YouTube and you type in Simon Sinek, he has about a 15-minute presentation that he is able to break down and share the importance of why we do what we do as organizations and why the why statement is very important before we try to implement the how and the what. So I would really encourage you to look up Simon and listen to his presentation. Like I said, it's about 15 minutes long. Self-efficacy has really become a huge element in successful leadership practices. If any of you are aware of John Hattie is a renowned educational researcher, and he has studied systems and what works within school systems by using a model called effect size. And what Mr. Hattie has found over the decade and the millions of students that he has studied is that the self-efficacy, teacher self-efficacy is the #1 effect size in improving student achievement. And again, I would encourage you to look up John Hattie. There's a lot of great information there about effect sizes. But it's important as leaders that we're, again, able to cultivate that will and skill level of the individuals who serve within our organizations to make the necessary changes that need to occur. Principle number 4 is continued with building coherence and clarity. Again, we want to ensure programs and initiatives support a focus on learning, and we want to have that common vocabulary. But the most important one that resonates with me is, again, simplify, simplify, simplify. Education is a very complex business. We have complex organizations because we deal with a multitude of personalities and skill levels and experiences and individual cultures. And so it's important that we recognize those practices that are effective, and we try to make sure that we are using those practices. And then those practices that we find that are not effective is that we eliminate them. And through that process, we just need to make sure that we are keeping things simple so that people understand what we're trying to accomplish as an organization. Principle number 5, model practices and expectations. And I really love this quote. I hear, I forget, I see, I remember, I do, I know. And because we are such a people-driven business, it's very important for leaders to have these specific skills and competencies. But the one that really stands out to me is a caring orientation. We want to make sure that we really understand our students, we really understand our staff members, we understand the challenges that they're facing, and that we really get to know them so that we can understand where they're at and know how to help those individuals. And then it's also important to celebrate, and that's something that we need to really work on as an education system, is even the littlest things we need to celebrate. And I know that schools are becoming better at that, and I hope that you will continue to celebrate the successes that you're having within your school district. Principle number 6 is reflecting on leadership effectiveness of self and others. One of the things that good leaders do is that they're voracious readers. It's so important to make sure that you're keeping up on the research and what is happening in your field. Very important to continue to read and to become a better reader so that you're able to understand, that you're able to get your mindset to where it needs to be, and that you're able to share your experiences with others. A book that our organization is currently reading is called Radical Candor. And it's been a great leadership book for myself because it's really allowed me, again, to reflect on my past practices and try to get better for my future opportunities within my organization. And I really appreciate that opportunity of reading that book as an organization. The last principle is developing leadership capacity in self and others. It's very important that we overcome the we and they myth. And what I mean by that is I remember when I was getting ready to accept my first principal position, and I made the announcement that I was leaving my teaching position. And I had several people come up to me and they mentioned, boy, are you sure you're ready to go over to the dark side? And the dark side represented administration. And that's kind of always stuck with me a little bit with things. But you know, it's not about us and them and being competitors or being against each other. It's just that we need to overcome that we-they myth to make sure that it's us. It's about us as an organization and helping students learn. And a good leader is able to develop the leadership capacity of not only themselves by studying and learning and reading and being a good example and being a risk taker, but also being able to develop the leadership capacity of our teachers and having them become leaders, because really they are leaders of our future leaders, and we want to make sure that, again, they're using their skills and talents to help prepare those future leaders that are going to lead us one day. So what I'd like to do is, Brenda, if you'll bring up the 12 Commandments document really quick. And thank you for enlarging that for us. I just want to go ahead and share this document with you. I had a colleague go ahead and give this to me a few years back when I was serving as a superintendent. And I want to lead the leadership portion of our PowerPoint with these 12 statements. And I'm just going to read through them really quickly. It says, number one, communicate the importance of mission, vision, and values and goals on a daily basis. You know, part of leadership is marketing what we believe and what we value and what our mission and vision is. And so it's very important that we take the time to communicate the importance of meeting our mission and our vision. Number two is establish reward structures and celebrate the school success. We talked briefly about that just a few minutes ago. We want to make sure that we're all
Mark, we just lost your audio. Are you still there? Okay, it looks like we lost Mark. Let's give him just a minute to see if he can dial back in. Okay, I just talked with Mark on his cell phone. He's going to try to dial back in really quickly. But Todd, if you're comfortable, Mark gave you the okay to keep going through the slide until he can get back in, okay?
Go back to the, here we go.
Yep.
Okay. So I don't know how he would have introduced this, but yes, so these are the 8 principles of management. And this is, we wanted to include some of this because, you know, we recognize that directors of special education are often in positions where you need to manage a lot of people. Sometimes you need to manage a lot of people that don't directly report to you to make sure that you're in compliance with the IDA and you're doing what's best for students with disabilities. And the first principle, communication, positive and effective communication is the foundation of leadership and management. We need to make sure that we have communication procedures in place and make sure that all staff adhere to those procedures. We want to make sure that parents, that our staff understands how they should be talking to parents and making sure that parents understand. We see a lot of issues with technical terminology with parents, and they, you know, sometimes speak a different language unless they've been in a school system for a long time, unless they are more familiar than most parents with special education. Sometimes it's difficult to get all of that across. And we also want to be open to communication lines. I don't know if this is part of what Mark wanted to share, but a lot of issues out there are just due to communication lines that are broken. Parents don't know how to get in touch with schools. Staff doesn't know how to get in touch with the special ed director. And we just need to really make sure that all of those lines of communication are open so that conversations can take place.
And Todd, you're doing great.
Do you want to jump back in here, Mark?
Sure, and I apologize for being disconnected. And what Todd said is exactly true with our communication. We just need to make sure that we have that communication with our staff members and our parents so that make sure that we're all on the same page. As far as communication, we need to focus on digital communication and office communication, and I'm going to just talk briefly about both of those. Those are very, very important when we're emailing someone, that we are using the right tone, the right grammar, the right language, and making sure that we are professional within our interactions through email, because emails can really take a huge turn on you if you're not very careful with the language or the tone that you use. As far as office communication, we want to make sure that we're professional with one another, and a lot of times where there's been elements of disrespect because of use of language and inappropriate stories or actions of people describing something. We just need to keep it at a professional level. I think that's a very big responsibility for leadership when we're communicating with one another. Principle number 2 is prioritize and delegate. Each day, we make a small list of the most important things that need to be accomplished. You need to make that list, but you need to also make sure that you can delegate some of those opportunities for other staff members so that they have the opportunity to also serve in some type of leadership capacity. And again, this kind of goes back to developing leadership capacity of others. So it's important to make sure that we prioritize and delegate. Principle number 3, managing time. I highlighted the top statement. Everyone has the same amount of time each day. We all have 24 hours, but it's how do we use our time that will make the difference. And so it's just kind of like budgeting our finances. If something is very, very important, we want to make sure that we're putting enough money in there to make that element successful. But it also goes along with time. Are we spending too much time on the little things that really don't matter that much? Or are we spending time on the things, investing time on the things that really do matter? So it's very important that we recognize that managing time element. Principle number 4, using technology. Use technology as a tool. Keep a balance between technology and human interactions. Again, we're a people business. It's very important that we separate ourselves from that technology and have face-to-face conversations with the individuals that we're meeting with. One of my pet peeves when I was serving as a lead in my leadership position is somebody bringing their cell phone in and they're texting away while either myself or a presentation was happening in our administrative meetings. And so it's very important that we're respectful to those who are presenting or trying to deliver important information by not being on our cell phones. Again, emailing, texting, this is very, very important. Remember that all your emails are public. And if you happen to have a cell phone that's being provided to you by your school district, those text messages may also could be submitted for public viewing. So we want to make sure that, again, you're being professional within those emails and those texts because a stakeholder out in your community may want to see those emails or see those text messages that are being distributed throughout the organization. Interacting with staff is very, very important. Take the time to interact with each of your staff members on a regular basis. Get to know something personal and express a real interest in that person's life. It's very, very important. One of my weaknesses that I have tried to work on as a leader is being approachable. Sometimes what my wife says is that I'm not very approachable because at times my face represents a scowl. And so that's one thing that I've really tried to improve is getting that scowl off my face and being a little bit more approachable to people. So that's very, very important in your leadership practice. Principle number 7 is hiring staff. What really stood out to me with this particular slide was that every new hire could be between a $1 and a $3 million decision when you're including the salaries and benefits. And so we want to make sure that you are hiring the right people. And one of the things that, as I look back on and reflect on my interview experiences, is that we always try to hire for the right fit. And I understand it and I get that, but I think that we really need to find out or to hire people that also bring results with being the right fit. Complacent organizations, in my opinion, hire for the right fit, where progressive organizations hire for not only fit, but what are the results that this person can bring to our organization. So very, very important. And then principle number 8 is conducting meetings. And it's very important to have a developed agenda with timelines. We want to make sure that we're always stating our purpose for every meeting. We want to make sure that we review our follow-up items so that we can discuss our next steps and to see if those things or those follow-up items have taken place. We want to make sure that we're starting and ending in accordance to the agenda. Especially in the time frames. If we say that our meeting is going to be from 9 to 11, we don't want to make sure that we go from 9 to 12 because time is very valuable to individuals. So make sure that we're staying within that time frame. And most importantly is let's not conduct meetings unless they are needed and there's a follow-up for those particular elements of that meeting agenda. So those are the 8 principles for management. So we've given you a lot of information this afternoon, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the time back over to Krista, and she's going to cover our next couple slides. But I want to thank you for your time, and again, I apologize for being cut off. Again, I would encourage you to go ahead and use those tools that I've provided for you. And if you have any questions, I highly recommend that you get a hold of Todd and Krista to go ahead and answer those questions or concerns that you may have. Thank you very much for your time.
And this is Todd, and Krista ran out of my office. I don't know why. But so I'll finish up here. I'm just kidding. I do know why she left. So I wanted to hit on here, though, that developing leadership capacity in yourself and others and becoming familiar with resources available. And there are a lot of great districts out there with really good leaders that we need to use as resources. And that's what we also do here as well. And part of that is becoming involved in various stakeholder groups that we have and that other organizations like COSA has with Oklahoma Directors of Special Services, becoming involved with you can go to the regional trainings that the Oklahoma Parent Center conducts. There's a lot of options out there to become more familiar with various resources and to kind of gain more competence in all aspects of the IDEA. That's very helpful to people. This is the webinar evaluation link, and so we hope that you fill it out so that we can get an idea of whether or not this is beneficial to you and any changes that we would need to make in the future. But I do appreciate everyone attending the webinar. And we'll close with TACE's motto, keep the main thing the main thing. So again, thanks for everyone attending. And if you do have any questions, just feel free to reach out to us. Thank you. And thank you, TACE, for sponsoring all these webinars this year and kind of putting them on for us. We really appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you.